3 and 4, it's me, Mr. A, back with story time for another day, and chapter 12, the final chapter of King Solomon's Mines. Here we go. And chapter 12 is called A Final Surprise. When we returned to Looe, Ignosi made many generous offers to us to stay, but we were all eager to get home. My only regret was that we had not been successful in our original objective. I could see the sadness in Sir Henry's eyes as we left the settlement, surrounded as we were by hundreds of cheering Kukuanas. Infidus told us of another route to the desert, just north of Sheba's peaks, which was considerably quicker and less hazardous than the one we had taken. The old warrior came with us as far as he could, then bade us a tearful farewell. 3 days later, we had left that wonderful hidden land behind us and were well across the desert. It was then that something quite extraordinary occurred. As we approached an oasis to fill our water bottles, a curious sight met our eyes. Not 20 yards ahead was a small hut. At that moment, a tanned man with a big black beard and clad in skins emerged from the hut. He seemed to be lame, and as he hobbled towards us he gave a cry. When he got closer, he exchanged looks with Sir Henry and then collapsed in a sort of faint. "Great powers!" cried Sir Henry. "It's my brother George!" That was lucky, wasn't it? Presently George recovered, and he and his brother hugged each other with joy. Whatever they had argued about in the past, it was evidently forgotten now. We were joined by Jim, the guide to whom I had given directions to the mines all those years ago. He told us how he'd lost the note, and that he and Sir Henry's brother had taken an alternate route. It was while resting at this oasis that George had met with an accident when a boulder became dislodged and landed on his leg. Unable to walk any distance, he'd remained here with his faithful servant ever since. The oasis had provided their water, and the animals that frequented it their food. That night we joined George and Jim around a campfire and recounted our own adventures. "By Jove, Henry," said George when we had shown him the diamonds, "at least you have got something to show for your pains, besides my worthless self." "They belong to Quatermain and Good," laughed Sir Henry. "It was part of the bargain that they should share any spoils." Good and I later tried to persuade Sir Henry to take a third share, but he'd have none of it. So, with his consent, we agreed to give them to his brother, who'd suffered as much as we had in the search for treasure. Our journey back to Sitanda's kraal was an arduous one, especially as we had to support George, but somehow we managed it. 5 months later, Sir Henry, George and Captain Good set sail for England, while I returned to my little house in Durban. Not long ago, I received a letter from Sir Henry, inviting me to stay with him in England for a time, if only to write an account of our amazing adventure. And do you know, I think I'll take him up on our offer. Somehow, it's a task I don't think I'd like to entrust to anybody else. Alright, that's the end of King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. There's a little note about H. Rider Haggard here, a little bit of history. He lived from 1856 to 1925. Henry Rider Haggard was born in Norfolk, England, the 8th of a family of 10 children. When he was 19 years old, his father sent him to what is now South Africa to work for the British Lieutenant Governor. Returning to England in 1882, he studied law, but he spent most of his time writing novels. His stories drew on his experiences in Africa and often featured intrepid adventurers and lost civilizations. He wrote King Solomon's Mines in 1885 after one of his brothers made him a bet that he couldn't write a story as good as Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, which was published in 1883. Haggard's novel was a huge hit. As well as writing, he toured the world advising on agriculture and land use, and he was made a Knight Commander of the British Empire in 1919. He died in London in 1925, aged 68. Alright, thanks very much for reading along with that. So I'll be back after half term with something new, and I hope to see you all then. In the meantime, have a lovely half term and take care everybody. Bye bye.